Once again, this is the Safe Routes to School webinar, number 2, as part of a 3-part series for folks in Illinois who want to learn more about how to apply for the 2023 round of Safe Routes to School funding. Next slide. We are recording the webinar and it'll be posted on our website, which we'll discuss where that is, where you can find that later. Everyone on the call is being automatically muted, no cameras. Please enter your questions via the chat function at the bottom on the menu of your Zoom screen. And you can also in that same place turn on closed captioning if it would be beneficial for you. Next slide. Active Transportation Alliance is one of the partners bringing this information to you today. We're a nonprofit advocacy organization based in the Chicago metro region. And our goal is to get public transit, walking and bicycling options on equal footing with driving so that it's safe, accessible, affordable to everybody in the region. My friend and colleague that's joining me today is Maggie Sherwinski, and you'll meet her in just a moment. Next slide. The reason we've gotten here today, though, is thanks to a 5-year initiative called the iSPAN Project. It stands for the Illinois State Physical Activity and Nutrition Program. And we are partnering with the Illinois Public Health Institute, and we are funded by the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, with the goal of making community level change, system policy change, in order to create an environment that is more health promoting. And that includes creating more walking and bicycling options for folks to get around. And Active Transportation Alliance's role in all of this is as a built environment technical assistance provider. So we're all here together today. Next slide. The webinar series is the second, as I mentioned, in a series. We are going to walk through the application today, and then we have one more scheduled with IDOT staff, and it's going to be almost all entirely Q&A, which is great. And we've heard from all of you in previous iterations of this type of webinar series that is one of the most valuable components, is to be able to speak with the Illinois Department of Transportation, who are the sponsors of the Safe Routes to School program, and get all of your individualized questions answered. I'm seeing that the audio is bad. I will try and fix that when I mute myself for the next few slides. Okay, next slide, please. So our agenda today, once again, is to walk through the Safe Routes to School application. We're going to walk through both the infrastructure and the non-infrastructure applications because they are separate. And then at the end, we've reserved, once again, time for questions and answers to be gone through. Please do put them in the chat, and we will kind of run through them at the end and give you an opportunity to say more about your question if you need to go into more detail. Next. And just one more little just an overall overview of the program. If you want more information on the specifics of the program, you can view the first webinar in our series, which goes into much more detail about all of this. But Safe Routes to School is ultimately it's a national program sponsored by many different states. And ours is obviously managed and administered by the Illinois Department of Transportation. They are graciously joining us for all of these webinars because the partnership between us, our organizations, and IDOT has been just again proven invaluable to folks that are trying to navigate the application process. The funding cycle for Safe Routes to School alternates between it's an every other year. So it alternates between this and the Illinois Transportation Enhancements Program. So 1 year it'll be ITEP, 1 year it'll be Safe Routes to School. The call for proposals in 2023 has been open since August the 1st, and closes October the 2nd, which gives you another about 5+ weeks to get your stuff together. There's $6 million on the table this year, which is quite a bit. It's 100% funding, which we are super excited, and the state is very excited to let everybody know about. So there is no local match required. And for infrastructure and non-infrastructure, walking and biking and rolling programs, they must be focused on enabling and encouraging students to walk and bicycle for the trip to school. So the school trip to and from that destination is the primary focus. And for another change this year, which is great, is it's for elementary, middle, and high school. So it can go from K to 12. All of those students can be serviced. All right, next question, next slide. Turning it over to Maggie now.
All right, thanks, Mel. So now we're going to walk you through the application for both the infrastructure and non-infrastructure applications. So next slide. So this is a look at the first page of the infrastructure application form. The total application is 3 pages long. The fields don't have any character limits here, but next slide. So this slide has a very similar looking form. This is the non-infrastructure application form, also 3 pages. And again, overall, it's very, very similar to the infrastructure application. We'll go through today what they both have in common, which is most of the questions. And then we'll pull out a few of the differences so you know what is exactly in the application form. So next slide. So for both applications, there is some general information that they're asking for. First is, what funding cycle are you applying for? And there you're going to enter the number 2023, so the year. And then it asks for contact information for both the sponsor and the applicant. And we just wanted to make sure you understand what the difference is. So the sponsor is, they administer the project and act as the fiscal agent, and the applicant can be any representative, and they're the point of contact for the application. So the sponsor and applicant could be the very same person or organization, but they don't have to be. So just so you're aware of the difference. Also in the application, if you are in an MPO, you should enter your contact information for the MPO also in the application. And then there are some questions about overall project cost and the amount that you're requesting from the grant. And just a reminder that for infrastructure projects, the maximum award is $250,000. And for non-infrastructure projects, the maximum award is $100,000. And we went over that in more detail in the first webinar, which is the recording is available on our website. It's activetrans.org/SRTS. And next slide. So there are a few yes or no questions that are meant to get more information about your project. So one question is, are you applying for the other grant type? So are you applying for either or both the infrastructure or the non-infrastructure grant? Applicants that apply for both grants, and again, you'll have to fill out 2 separate applications. That'll help your score if you're applying for both types of grants. There's a question about, is this project dependent upon the completion of another Safe Routes to School project? And then a question about school proximity. So is the project located within 2 miles of a school campus, or that for a K through 12 school? And then finally, is additional right-of-way required? If it's needed, right-of-way acquisition should be completed before the application submittal deadline on October 2nd. So, and that should be documented in your application. And then actually finally, so the parent survey and student tallies, also a yes or no question, is it included? And this is a requirement, but IDOT is looking for a summary of your results. So please attach a summary to your application, not all of the responses from the surveys and the tallies. And we'll talk a little bit more later on in the webinar about some tools to help you collect that information. But just a heads up that collecting this data will involve working with the school districts, and student tallies are typically completed by teachers, and the schools also have contacts with the parents. So next slide. All right, these are a few optional documents that can help you document community support through your application, which is very important for this grant and will also help boost your score. There is a question about, did you conduct key stakeholder interviews? And IDOT has a form on their the Safe Routes to School webpage with questions you can use and a place where you can document responses to the interview. Did you hold a public meeting? And this project was discussed, and you can document any information showing that this happened. And then question about doing a walkability or bikeability check. So there's a checklist, and you can walk or bike the route around the school with various stakeholders like local officials or school officials, law enforcement, with parents, with students. And students are definitely recommended to be a part of any type of walkthrough. And you can use the checklists, which are also on IDOT's website, to make notes about your experience and what people are looking for. And you can include the checklists and the information from those audits in your application, as well as attach any photos. And then finally, if your school has a school wellness policy, you should include that in your application. But if the school doesn't have something like that, don't worry about it. But if you do, please attach it to your application. Next slide. And now I'll turn it back over to Melody to speak more about kind of the meat of the application, which is the narrative about your project.
Thanks, Maggie. Yeah, so we wanted to talk about narratives that apply to either one of the applications, the infrastructure or the non-infrastructure. So obviously we want you to identify the project location. This is much more important for infrastructure projects, of course. You need to identify what schools will be impacted if you have more than one school along a certain route that you look to improve, or programming that's going to occur across different schools. Describe your project, obviously. And we want to emphasize quality over quantity. Try to be as concise as possible. Keep the the wordiness to a minimum. You can also include attachments if you feel like there's a more elaborate or more detailed type of narrative that you'd like to attach. The demonstration of need, really kind of call out why this is so crucial to this student body or these groups of students in their residential area and how they access school, etc. And call out any hazards and barriers. This is where photographs come in very handy. Anticipated project impact, if you can, do the best you can to forecast how much safer this is going to make kids who are walking and biking. Is it going to, do you anticipate it'll reduce injuries and fatalities? Do you, other types of safety improvements? And then mode choice. That's kind of, these are the two sides of the Safe Routes to School coin, which is making it safer for students to walk and also to increase the level of walking and biking. So is your project going to, enable more students to walk and bike to school who couldn't do so in your current circumstance? Under project readiness, we want you to think about, or IDOT wants you to think about things like your right of way, how shovel ready is your project specifically in terms of infrastructure. So the more ready to go you are, the better. So if you've already done your right-of-way acquisitions or you have a plan for that, if you've already got engineering, phase 1 engineering done, explain that. And if you've already spoken to your MPO, for example, if you've already made arrangements with your county or any other partners, your public health department, that are going to be integral to being successful, put that in the project readiness piece. And then consultation and support is all those letters of support that we kind of went through in the first webinar. Next. In the summary and context section, you will have more of an opportunity to be more kind of expressive in terms of selling your project. Make it as attractive as possible, really kind of pump up the benefits, and also note your safe routes to school team members. So if you have an active PTA or a PTO, if your principal or your vice principal is very engaged, if you're using any consultants, external consultants, if you have a great volunteer program, maybe you have a Kiwanis Club or a senior citizens, association, or that is going to be participating. In terms of calling out these 3 different roles, we'll go over this again. We talked about this a little bit in the first webinar too, that the grantee contact, I'm going to start with the middle one, that is your fiscal connection. That is the person at the city or at the school district that is going to be managing the actual fiscal components of, and going to be in touch with IDOT in terms of monies and billing and invoicing and things like that. The project manager is whoever is going to be supervising the entire initiative. So that could be, once again, somebody at the city, it could be somebody at the school district, but kind of, has a overall view of whether the project is moving along its course and going to be done in a timely fashion. Then the safe routes to school local coordinator, this is more of your kind of on the ground person that is going to be in touch with how things are going on a day-to-day basis. So this could be your construction consultant, it could be your contractors, it could be a teacher or somebody at the school crossing guard, whatever, that is more in touch with what's happening on a day-to-day basis. Next. Great. On the infrastructure application only, you will see this checklist, an improvements checklist, and it lists out all of the eligible types of projects that can be supported through the grant. And it's fairly clear cut. If there's anything listed there that you're not quite sure about the definition, you could certainly reach out to IDOT or to Active Trans on that, and we could help you better define it. But it's very, very straightforward. And yeah, just make sure you're clear on all the elements that you're going to be including. Next. Also on the infrastructure application is your detailed cost estimate. This is the total estimation of all the costs that are going to be included. You'll definitely need to have a qualified engineer help you with this if there is not one on staff, whichever consultants you work with. This is a very heavily weighted piece in the scoring. So it's really important to spend some quality time with this and think through all of the pieces and all of the possible places where costs will come into it, and obviously be thoughtful in terms of future escalations of costs, inflation, all those things. There is a cost estimate form in the application itself. But you also need to attach a separate cost estimate, and it can be in a format of your choosing, but it's probably a good idea to use IDOT's form BDE 213 as a guide, because that is how IDOT's going to be accounting for your costs. So putting it in that format just makes it simpler for everybody. And that form, there's a copy of that form included on the website that you can download. Next. In terms of the non-infrastructure application, these are specific only to the non-infrastructure application. There are questions about who's going to be responsible for the project and the programming. That could be your project, you know, the Safe Routes to School coordinator that you name. Do your best to identify the number of students impacted. You know, if it's an education program where you're going to be doing, you know, bicycle education or bike rodeos for the entire school, then it's that. If you're going to be doing a walking school bus for a specified number of kids along certain routes, that will be your answer. Then you are going to be telling IDOT whether you are selecting one of the mini grant options that we talked about in the first webinar, those predefined, you know, kind of packages of activity, a walking school bus, etc. Or if you are designing your own non-infrastructure program. And then the applicant's going to have to commit to, in addition to providing those school travel tallies with your application, you're going to commit to doing those again within 6 months of the end of your project. So we're looking for before and after impacts. Those are harder to come by with infrastructure projects because it takes a while, right? It takes years, maybe sometimes, to get new infrastructure in and to see the impact of people starting to use it. But with non-infrastructure programming, hopefully you start to see, you know, if you have a rewards or an incentive program that you're putting in, you're starting to see those benefits immediately. Next slide. I'm turning it over to Maggie again.
All right. So next slide, Edgar. We just wanted to review the required documents for your application. So one is the application itself. So that's a PDF form that you can download from IDOT Safe Routes to School webpage. Second is you're going to need 2 documents from your sponsoring roadway authority. So you need a resolution of financial commitment and a letter of support from the sponsor for any affected roadway. And so you, as Melody stated before, 100% of costs are covered through the grant as long as they're eligible expenses. So in that resolution, you would just need to say that the sponsor would pay for any ineligible items or costs that go over the grant award. The school district, third, also needs to provide either a resolution or a letter of support to essentially approve the project. And then fourth here is if your project is on or intersects a state road, you'll need to get a letter of allowance from IDOT, from your district. So you should get started on that as soon as possible if you haven't already, because it can take some time to get it, but contact your IDOT district's local road engineer or office to get that letter. And then as Melody was explaining earlier, the detailed cost estimate prepared by an engineer will need to be attached to your application. And then the parent surveys and student tallies, a summary of those results. Next slide. And then just to discuss a little bit more about the parent surveys and student tallies, just ways that you can collect that information. So it doesn't matter what tool you use or how you summarize the data, but there are a few options out there to help you. So one is there are PDFs available on IDOT's webpage. So with the tally sheets and the surveys that you could print and pass out to teachers, pass out to parents. Those are available in both English and Spanish. And then there is also an online tool, saferoutesdata.org, and it is a tool from the National Center for Safe Routes to School, and it can help you with collecting that data, visualizing it, summarizing it for your application. And then finally, we took the the tally sheets and the surveys, and we put them into a Google form, both the English and Spanish version. And so that's available for you if you'd like to collect it through Google. You can email me, Maggie@activetrans.org, if you're interested in that option. I'll send you instructions on how to do that and then give you access once those instructions are confirmed on your end. And I did want to ask, actually, Kelly and John. So I know, like previously we said that ideally data from the student tallies and the parent surveys was collected either last year or this right now, like, or in September before the application deadline. But I saw in the Q&A that you might be willing to collect data from some previous years. So could either of you speak to that briefly?
Sure. Obviously sooner is better. So, you know, if you can possibly get the tallies and the surveys done now, that's great. But we also realize that as schools came through and out of pandemic mode and all of that, it could be difficult. But we will take anything from to 2019 forward. We don't want anything older than 2019.
Great, thanks, John.
Sure.
All right, next slide. And then wanted to talk a little bit more about the detailed cost estimates. So as you heard from Melody, those need to be done accurately by an engineer, someone with thorough knowledge of quantities and costs of the full project, like Public Works. IDOT engineers will be evaluating this part of the application. So it's very important that this is done by someone with the proper skill set. And we have heard that, you know, as costs have been increasing over the last year, be generous with those cost estimates. But you know, not everyone has access to an engineer. So we did reach out to several engineering firms around the state that do have some capacity to offer application support to some high need communities as they're able. So you can check out that list of engineering firms. You could also hire them, but at activetrans.org/SRTS. However, it's important to note that if an engineering firm is providing application support to you, that does not guarantee that they will be selected for paid work. And it also doesn't mean that the sponsor can skip the quality-based selection process. So we just want to make sure that is noted by all of you and understood. So next slide. And then there's the GATA process, so the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act, which there are a few forms that are required for some applicants. If you're applying for the infrastructure grant, GATA is required for everyone except if you're a local public agency, like a local municipality. Generally, that is the case. Local municipalities are typically the sponsor for infrastructure projects. So GATA is not required for you in that case. But if you are not a local public agency, you do need to fill out the GATA forms for the infrastructure application. For non-infrastructure applications, however, everyone needs to fill out the GATA forms. So please make sure to get started on that if it's required in your case, because this process can also take some time. So there is a GATA portal account if you don't have one. The link's there. There are 4 documents that are required. And a link to this is on the Safe Routes to School IDOT webpage, but there is a GATA handbook that addresses a lot of general questions about GATA that should be helpful for you, but we are not experts in GATA. So if you do have any GATA questions, please email dot.gata@illinois.gov. And next slide. And for GATA, we'll post this on our webpage as well, but there is some NOFO information that you'll need. So NOFO is Notice of Funding Opportunity. So there's a NOFO number and there's an agency title, and then there's some other numbers in the fiscal year that you need to enter. So that is the updated information for this year's application, which again, we'll put on the activetrans.org/SRTS website. Next slide. And then just a note about a few other optional documents that you can include to, help enhance your application. So providing more additional letters of support from project partners can really show that the community is involved. So the MPO, the parent teacher organizations, local school councils, nonprofits, law enforcement, local businesses, public health agencies, probably many other types of groups, but getting that support and showing that there's interest in this project from the community can really help your application. And then other documents also can help highlight what you're trying to do, including photos, maps, showing the design that you're envisioning. If you have a school wellness policy, your walk audit findings, photos from events, speed studies, and many other ideas as well. So just think through, like, how can you really make the case for your project? And don't be afraid to include that information in your application. So next slide. All right, so finally, how do you submit your application? So again, your application is due 4:30 p.m. Central Time on Monday, October 2nd. To get the application form, so you're going to need to go to IDOT Safe Routes to School page, and there's a link there. However, if you click the link, you'll get an error. So you'll need to right-click on the link, and you can save as. Save the file on your desktop, and then you can open the file directly from your desktop. So it's just a bug right now, but that's how you can access the application. So it is possible. Just make sure to right click that link, and you'll see that 3-page form where you can fill out all of the required information. And so you'll take that form, save it, and attach it to an email. And in that email, attach not only the application form, but attach all of your required documents that we just went through, and anything else you want to include in your application. And you'll email that to the email that it's on the screen there, but it is in that PDF. So you don't need to write that email down. It's in the PDF that you can just copy and paste it in your email and send off all your information. So a hard copy is not required this year, fortunately. So it's just that email you need to send. And then this winter, IDOT will be evaluating all of the applications, and awards are expected to be announced spring 2024. And next slide. So before we open it up to all of you to open Q&A, we wanted to address one question that IDOT has been getting a lot of questions on. So it's related to community plans. So the question is, what type of community plan is eligible for non-infrastructure grant funding, and what should that plan focus on? So John or Kelly, would you like to answer that one?
Sure. Some of you know that we took a tour around the state during the spring and held open meetings for local agencies, consultants, actually whoever was interested, to talk about some of the programs that we manage. And one of the things that came up in discussions about Safe Routes to School was a project that was completed, I think maybe 2018, Maggie, something like that, by the Village of Glencoe. They had asked us about putting together a community Safe Routes to School plan, basically, that they could distribute to their students. This plan was, it was done by ATA. Is that correct? That is correct, Maggie, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, okay. And basically what ATA did was they went around the village of Glencoe, and they mapped out where all of the stop signs were, where all the crosswalks were, traffic signals, all of that stuff. And they worked with the community to determine which were the best routes, which were the best streets, sidewalks to use to get from individual neighborhoods to their schools. And that the result of that project is on our webpage, on the Safe Routes to School webpage. If you look for Glencoe, you will find it. And what they did was put together a booklet, and that booklet has maps indicating where the determined safest routes are for all of the different schools in Glencoe, and then also tips and about how to walk and bike to school most safely. And it's a brilliant little booklet, and those were distributed to all of the students in Glencoe. So we kind of started talking about that, and we started realizing how important that type of a plan can be for the local agencies, because not only does it provide safe routes and letting the kids know, how they can walk and bike to school safely, but it also works as kind of an a larger blueprint for the community, and by allowing them to look at where the preferred routes are, and that then gives them ideas about where they should focus their resources when it comes to infrastructure grants. So we've been talking a lot about that, and because of those discussions, we've been getting a lot of questions. What can we include in a community plan? Can we use this community plan as beyond the Safe Routes to School? Can we use this as an ADA transition plan for our community? Can we include bike paths? Can, for ITEP funding and that type of thing? Yes, you can. But we need to not lose sight of the focus, and that would be to identify the safest routes for the kids getting to and from school from home. That has to be the primary focus. And so we just wanted to kind of reiterate that here in this webinar. That type of a document, that type of a plan, could be used for a lot of different things. But we need to make sure that we don't lose sight of what we're focusing on for this grant. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. I think you're in a good position. And Maggie, I'm right in saying that we have posted a copy of the Glencoe plan on our Safe Routes website.
Yeah, and it should be on ours and IDOT's.
And IDOT.
It should be
So
easy to find somewhere.
yeah, just use that as a guide for what an eligible plan might look like. Yeah, and a lot of communities have done things like added an addendum to their existing pedestrian and bicycle community level plan. It's an extra chapter, for Safe Routes to School, or they're doing a broader plan and you want to, include a Safe Routes chapter. So you're going to apply for money to, pay for that chapter, that kind of thing. So yeah, like John said, just keeping that focus on the Safe Routes component and not letting it get too far away from that goal. I think we go to the next slide. Thanks, Edgar. Now we're going to do Q&A, and the way we'll do this is the way we've done it in the past. We're going to go to the Q&A box. We have 22 questions that have been asked and answered. So we'll just summarize those. I will restate the question, and then Kelly, our friend Kelly Larimore from IDOT, will repeat her question, her answer. And then there's one open question that Kelly thinks would be better answered, verbally. So starting from the top, the question is, maximum funding is at 100% for infrastructure is accurate? Kelly says yes. For both infrastructure and non-infrastructure, 100% funding. Next question is, do we have to have easements before submitting? Kelly's answer is that, excuse me, sorry, that was a mistake. Right-of-way easements are not reimbursable with Safe Routes funding. However, you do have 6 months after an award is made to complete your engineering, phase 1 engineering and right-of-way easements. But if you do have concerns about obtaining those, and that's left open, it might decrease your score. The next question is, are surveys and tallies required? And I think we just talked about that. If so, what if they're a couple of years old? And yes, they're required, but the preference is that they be no older, going back any further than 2019. Next question is, do you upload the parent surveys with the same tool as the student tallies are used to upload? And do you need to use the Google Forms, or is there a summary spreadsheet that can be used with the pie chart? And Kelly's answer is there are no stipulations or guidelines on the way you format your student tally and parent survey results. So whatever works for you.
Can I just jump in there real quick?
Yep.
And just say, we do not want copies of all of the surveys. We want the results. So, we're not doing hard copies this year. But I remember in the past when everyone would send all of their paper copies in and we would have piles and piles. We don't need to see every single parent survey or tally, but we do want to see the results. If parents do put comments on the surveys, we would like, you can just type those out on a Word document or something like that so we can see their comments, but we don't need to see every single one.
Great, thanks, John. Question is, should school district wellness policies be included for both types of application? The answer is yes. Please do upload those if it's an infrastructure or non-infrastructure project. Next question is the educational component to be incorporated within a school's curriculum, or is it for events outside of the school, or both? And the answer is that, programming is for school-age children within the applicant community. There's a link to the funding guidelines, but let me ask this of John and Kelly. For example, if a local fire department wants to host a bike rodeo, or if a Kiwanis Club wants to sponsor free helmet giveaway with helmet fittings, and those are outside of school, school time, they're outside of the school facility, are those eligible? John or Kelly?
Those would be eligible.
Okay, great.
Yep, we could do that. We just have to make sure that, it's a non-infrastructure, so forget what I was just going to say.
We've all been there. Next question is, if we're including school sidewalk improvements as part of a larger roadway project, should we include the total project costs or just the sidewalks and safe routes to school related portion? And Kelly's answer is that that IDOT does want to understand the context of the entire project, but the funding that you apply for should only be for the school component. So things that are directly impacting student safety while they walk, bike, or roll to school. So you can include the entire project in your description, but the budget portion should only address those elements serving the school. Next question is, for infrastructure applications, are contingency costs allowed? And if so, at what percentage? And John's answer is no, they are not. Contingency costs are not to be included in your cost estimate.
Yep, we do want you to anticipate what you feel the bidding climate might be like, but basically contingency costs are not eligible. So contingency is just a bad word on the cost estimate. So
Yeah.
if you put on if you have a line item on your budget that says contingency, $20,000, and you're awarded the project, as soon as you have that kickoff meeting, FHWA will see that and they will say, oh, contingency costs are not eligible. We won't give you that $20,000. So if you do anticipate that costs are going to rise over the next year or a couple of years, when this finally goes to bid, then you need to reflect that in the actual line items. Don't reflect it as just one contingency line.
Great, thank you. Next question was about the Google form for the survey, and we answered that already. You can get that downloaded on the Active Trans website, or you can just email Maggie. Next question is, can non-infrastructure funding go towards compensation for parents who are hired as walking school bus drivers, for example? And the answer is no. And this question used to come up a lot with regard to like police officers. If you wanted to do some police training or pay for extra crossing guard hours or something. Yeah, the answer is no. None of this money can be used for salaries or stipends. The next question was, let's see, more about curriculum development, and if a school already has like lessons and content that could easily be incorporate additional, walking and biking safety, for example. And the question was, are there examples of what that might look like? And the answer is that there are locations on the web. There are long-standing national information clearinghouses that have lots of examples of non-infrastructure programming. Active Trans also has a very brief information sheet on our website that talks about that lists out some some resources for education that we have vetted. They're mostly federal agencies that have developed this content. So there are videos and workbooks and bike rodeo plans and things like that that you can download. So the National Center for Safe Routes to School is one of those resources, and that was an initiative that was funded by Federal Highways Administration. And then there is another nonprofit organization called the Safe Routes National Partnership. Both of those are wealth of information for Safe Routes to School on the programming side. So I would suggest you Google those and check them out. Next question is, are agencies allowed to submit 2 or more infrastructure applications? And the answer is no, that a single sponsor or applicant are restricted to 1 infrastructure and 1 non-infrastructure application per school or school campus within the 2023 cycle. If you have 2 separate school, you're in a large area, serve a larger region, it's more spread out, more rural, and you want to submit applications for 2 different schools that are not, on the same campus, that would be a separate thing. Am I right about that, John?
Contact us.
Okay,
contact us and we'll discuss it. We'll come up with the best possible way for you to submit your applications.
great. There's a question about whether the slideshow, the webinar will be available afterwards, and the answer is yes. Check the website. Let's see, paging down. Is there a maximum allowed as far as attachments when the grant application is submitted? And Kelly answers that they can accept up to 10 megabytes through the inbox. So when you are emailing your application, that's the limit for the that's the attachment limit. Anything larger, you'd need to use some sort of a file transfer site. They prefer pictures over video. Obviously, video takes up a lot of space, and summaries over obviously the copies of the tallies, as John just mentioned. Next question. Could a municipality apply for Safe Routes to School non-infrastructure funding to ensure that child-centered infrastructure design is centered in their next comp plan? That's a very interesting thought. This could involve detailed research to understand where our children are living and where our low-hanging fruit improvements are. Kelly's response is, we are always excited to see project ideas relating to evaluation. So she suggests reaching out to the dot.saferoutes@illinois.gov email address and checking your ideas to see if those would be eligible. Next question is sidewalk relocation from a carriage walk to separate it with a parkway, an eligible project. And the answer is, see here, it's a two-part question. Yes, it would be eligible in the way that it's described by Andrew. So that's a more specific question we can get into later if anybody's interested. Next question is, the funding is just for infrastructure, engineers, contractors to produce the plans and specifications and construction management oversight. And Kelly's answer is infrastructure grants will pay for construction and construction engineering. So I don't know if that answered your question, May. We have some open questions. And Kelly's going to answer this one live. If our city was awarded funding in 2021 and the MPO was the sponsor and they want to apply for a continuance of that project, does the MPO have to be the applicant again, or can the municipality apply on its own? And I'll open the mic to Kelly. I don't think we can hear you, Kelly, if you're saying something.
I can hear her talking across the room, but she's yeah, for some reason it's not working. So I can jump in here. The city was awarded funding in 21 using MPO. Was the I'm not really understanding the question. Was the MPO the sponsor in the last cycle?
Yeah, this is an anonymous attendee question. But what it looks like is, yes, that in 2021 there was an awarded project, and the MPO. The MPO was the sponsor. And if a municipality wants to continue that project, do something in addition, could they apply on their own related to the prior project, or does the MPO have to be the applicant?
I think I would say yes. But I guess my next question would be, at what stage is the 2021 project now? Has the project been completed, or are they still in the design phase and they want to continue further design for a new project? I would ask that attendee to contact us so that we can discuss the specifics of what's what's happening.
Sounds good.
Okay.
There was a question about, oh, and I think Kelly answered it. Typing. Was there, is there an example of a detailed cost estimate for non-infrastructure projects, as there is for infrastructure projects? How would you like those budgets to be formatted? And I don't know the answer yet, but
Yeah,
go ahead.
give us as much information as possible. I'll
Yeah.
put it that way.
It's mostly going to be supplies.
Supplies, equipment,
Supplies and
you know, it
equipment.
may be printing, that type
Right.
of thing.
Right.
If they're looking at, you know, say for like one of the community plans, and they want, you know, X number of dollars for a consultant, we would want to know what they've received from a potential consultant in regards to how the funds are going to be spent.
Okay, great. Another question, is the 6-month preliminary engineering requirement following an announcement on an award, is it 180 days, or is there a bit of flexibility within reason? Or would that lower the applicant's score, as previously mentioned?
The PE requirement is flexible. What is not flexible, it would be the requirement that construction funds need to be obligated in 18 months, I believe is what it is. That one is more firm. The preliminary engineering is a little more flexible.
Got it. Okay. Let's see. And I think we're almost done here. Last question is, what's the best email address to contact for clarifications? And the answer is right there on your screen, dot.saferoutes@illinois.gov. The application and all the guidelines can be found at idot.illinois.gov. And Active Trans's Safe Routes to School page that includes downloads for the tallies and you know, the Glencoe plan and all that other stuff is activetrans.org/SRTS. And the webinar posting will be posted there also after the fact. And barring any last minute questions, we'll give about a 30 count for that if there's anything left. But the folks at IDOT are they're very highly responsive and really do love clarifying questions so that there's no confusion. There's as little confusion as possible on your side when you're putting together your application and to create the highest quality applications as possible. Let's go to the next slide. Our next webinar is September 20th. So put a hold on your calendar there. And remember, your applications are due October the 2nd. So that final webinar is going to be for kind of last minute questions. We might do a little bit of share a little bit of information on non-infrastructure program ideas and have a guest come in and talk about a few things that she and their community have done. It'll be we're approaching the last minute there, so it wouldn't be necessarily information that you can use to include in your current. But if you were, for example, applying for one of the mini grants, hopefully our guests could give you some guidance on what a walking school bus program looks like, or what a bicycle training course looks like, things like that. So okay, I think we're at the end here. Any closing thoughts from our IDOT partners? Maggie? 3, 2, 1. Great. Well, it's been a pleasure, everybody. Hope you got some good information out of this. You know who to contact if you have more questions, and we will see you on September the 20th. Thanks a lot.